Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. We will get started very soon. Oh, we're good to go. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Suli Inidio, and I am one of the co-chairs for this year's Latinx Connect conference, Imaginemos Juntos, Dialogues on Thriving Latinx Futures. I am co-chairing with my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Victor Figuereo, who's also here with us. And we both serve as interim co-directors for the Center of Ethnic Studies Research at USIS at the University of Pittsburgh. I am so thrilled and honored to be moderating this talk. Um, and I have the distinct honor of introducing our panelists who are co-directing CiNEOLA. I'm first going to introduce Daniel Díaz. Daniel is a Colombian British filmmaker based in San Francisco since 2019. He is the founder, co-director of the Latin American documentary platform, which we'll be learning about today, CiNEOLA, and the director of marketing and audience strategy at community media organization BAVC Media, Bay Area Video Coalition. He's the director of Elefan, for those of you that joined us last Latinx Connect last year. Um, we got to see Elefan, which was a beautiful documentary film about the displacement of London's Latin American community, which was screened in London's Tate Modern and Barbican Theater, as well as festivals including the 2023 Philadelphia Latino Film Festival, the San Francisco Urban Film Fest, and Watsonville Film Festival, among others. Daniel recently completed his latest short film, Junior Tu Papa, which I got to see, y'all. It's beautiful. It's a documentary exploring connection, memory, and diasporic identity through a football match played in 1993. He was also the producer of award-winning Chilean feature film Camaleón and by Jorge Riquelme Serrano and co-producer of award-winning climate activism documentary Finite: The Climate of Change by Rich Felgate. Thank you so much for being here, Daniel. And I'm also going to take this opportunity to introduce our other panelist, Diana Sánchez Maciel, who is a producer and programmer born in Mexico City and partly raised in California. Her work ranges from experimental films to producing documentary films. Diana is an advocate for artist-made non-commercial cinema. She co-founded and curated the Archive Project at SFSU School of Cinema, where she advocated for film preservation, archiving literacy, and supported historic and cultural insight to yearly programming. Very beautiful work, Diana. She has participated in programmed work at Ann Arbor Film Festival, Mill Valley Film Festival, Crossroads, and SF Film, San Francisco Film. She is currently producing a documentary film, The Shape of Light, about the evolution of the exhibition of moving images, with a particular focus on two beloved San Francisco Bay Area theaters. Diana is a bilingual programmer educator and education program manager at the California Film Institute. She recently joined as co-director and curator at CiNEOLA. Diana proudly serves the San Francisco Cinematheque Board of Directors and is currently a shorts programmer for the Sundance Film Festival. So yes, thank you so much for being here and sharing your beautiful art, both of you. Let's go ahead and get started. How did you both, I know we're going to talk about CiNEOLA, but I want to just quickly, I want you all to share, how did you both get started in filmmaking and documentary filmmaking?
Diana, you want to go first?
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you, Sully, first for that lovely introduction. How did I get started in filmmaking? Where I think since I was in high school, I started loving film. I joined film club. My English teacher was the film club leader, and I started watching like really old classic Hollywood films, and I started learning just more about becoming more interested in filmmaking
Mm.
and the craft of filmmaking and kind of like understanding just film history with this different perspective. And then I wanted to be a film critic. So then I went to San Francisco State University thinking that I would want to be a film critic.
Mhm.
And then from there, I learned a lot of things from like experimental film. San Francisco State University has a very rich history in experimental film there. So I started kind of delving a little bit more on experimental filmmaking. But then I also started kind of working and interning at film festivals and realized that, well, that part of me that wanted to be a film critic could be translated into working at film festivals, kind of just programming and looking at films and being critical about films and advocating for films. And I thought that was like a perfect match. So that's has been kind of my experience for within San Francisco State, just working on experimental films, documentary films, and also just starting my film festival career within there. So
Lovely. Thank you so much for sharing, Daniel.
So yeah, thank you for the intro as well. Thanks everyone for joining. And yeah, very happy to be back after a wonderful experience at the last Latinx Connect, where we got to share Elephant, which we'll talk a little bit about in this panel as well. But yeah, I don't know, it's a bit of a weird one. I guess I never really like thought or like saw myself as like becoming a filmmaker. I think like a lot of us, like definitely had a great like affinity for film, for like cinema. I grew up like learning like languages a lot, and I think that film was always kind of like my way in, I guess, in terms of, you know, like French teachers like just sharing some, just classic French films, things like Les Amants du Pont Neuf and like La Haine, and that really kind of like opened my eyes and was quite like transformative for me around that time. I think it's like a well-trodden path of like a 15, 16-year-old discovering like independent international cinema and like watching the likes of, I don't know, like Shane Meadows and like City of God and like Len and like Amores Perros and all of these.
Oh, wow.
And I was definitely on kind of like a creative path that was, kind of took me more into like marketing,
Mhm.
and that's kind of where I felt that it was, I guess, reasonable and like realistic to like channel that like creative side of things.
Yeah.
And then I found myself in marketing for film and in like the entertainment industry, which is kind of where I'd always wanted to be. And yeah, I think just through various experiences, meeting like various, artists, generous friends, and kind of like receiving the support, I guess, to feel like I could kind of like take the leap to actually start kind of making stuff myself. I feel
Mhm.
like that's kind of like the journey I've been on in like the past, 7, 8, 9 years. But yeah, typically like my backgrounds come from like marketing in film, and that started just over 10 years ago. Kind of,
Mhm.
in like social media, doing social media for things like 12 Years a Slave and Man of Steel and The Hobbit, Spring Breakers, like a whole range of kind of like studio and smaller studio like indie releases.
Mhm.
And then yeah, since moving so I've lived in San Francisco for like almost 4.5 years now.
Mhm.
And moving here, I think, was another very like significant shift, like for me, like personally and kind of just creatively. Diana kind of touched on like the experimental scene here,
Mhm.
and just like the very rich kind of, you know, especially in like non-fiction kind of
Mhm.
like community that exists. There's a lot going on for a relatively small space. And Diana and I actually met working at the California Film Institute.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
and uh, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that and also sharing how y'all met. That's awesome. I was gonna ask that next, so perfect. So then tell me about how you got started with creating CiNEOLA. Like what was the moment where you were like, some did you find like a gap that you're like, I need to fill this gap within the kind of film industry? Like, what was the moment that you decided to create this and found this?
Yeah, I think it might have been like 10 years ago, almost like
Mm,
exactly at this point. Um, I I quit my job and I just bought like a flight to Chile from London. Um, and while I was in Chile, I was living in Santiago, and I I kind of gone to scope it out, and I was like looking at this. So that like there's this program called Startup Chile, which is essentially a tech accelerator that's
Hmm.
government government backed over there in terms of a program that was designed, I guess, to just like reinvigorate the local kind of like, entrepreneurship kind of like tech scene in the South.
Mhm.
And um, I kind of got into that program with CiNEOLA in its first iteration, which was essentially like a crowdfunding platform with the intention of having a crowdfunding and distribution kind of wrapped into one, and audience building kind of being this kind of being this kind of like packaged solution for filmmakers to, I guess, have like a certain sense of autonomy, that is especially within like Latin America from my perspective, wasn't always the case. I think there was a very different approach to like financing films and to distribution, where there was, I guess there was just like a less of a like diversity of options, I guess, in that sense. And so that was kind of what it was, kind of positioned as initially, that kind of that an answer to that question, basically solving for that problem. And then, so yeah, we kind of crowdfunded a project in Chile, which was Camaleon, by a Chilean director called Jorge Riquelme Serrano. And that was my first kind of foray into producing. So I was one of the producers on that project. And then eventually I moved back to London. CiNEOLA was kind of like parked. It was kind of, maybe had a few different kind of like forms, but when I came back to San Francisco, kind of like resuscitated it in the form that you see now, which for me was much more about um, a different kind of distribution. I think a distribution that was kind of focused on short films first, for sure. I think that there's definitely, that's definitely a problem that I think many people have like been trying to solve for and like struggle to solve for, in terms of like sustainabilities of kind of like careers, and I think adequate valuation of short film content,
Mhm.
and trying to step away from this almost like notion of like disposability when it comes to short films.
Yeah.
And you know it's such a kind of incredible like gateway into like emerging like talent, but I think aside from that, it is a very valid form unto itself. It doesn't necessarily need to be like a
Mhm.
stepping stone towards a feature film. I think that there's maybe a lack of kind of like appreciation and recognition for that, of kind
Yeah.
of recognizing the value that short film have. And so the idea was always to create a platform where we have short films, have additional kind of content as well, and create this connection with the context, the story, the artist that surrounds the film, to kind of have that kind of deeper audience engagement. And yeah, of course, from a very yeah, like Latin Americanist kind of perspective as well, kind of really looking back at the region, at the identities, the cultures,
Mhm.
everything that kind of makes up the region. And that was just always something that I think for me, especially, there's always been that connection that
Mhm.
maybe kind of like missing, and film was always like a way um to address that. Um I think it looks very different being in the US versus being in the UK.
Mhm.
Um, but but yeah, that was always kind of my intention. And since being in San Francisco, and especially with Diana kind of joining the team and coming on board now,
Yeah.
um, we're expanding into doing a lot more kind of like in-person, like theatrical screenings, some of the production stuff that we'll kind of get onto on this as well. But we have, yeah, online distribution, and honestly just trying to create a platform that is, you know, of service to the filmmakers as much as it is to the audience in terms of like discovery and exploration and yeah, like trying to doing our best in terms of like curation and that to make sure that will make sense.
Yeah, that, I mean, it sounds like y'all are making a space for folks to say through film the things that they want to say that would otherwise in more traditional spaces would get rejected because it's not, you know, hitting the things in the status quo. And I really love what you said about short film being its own thing and not a stepping stone to something else, because there's something to be said about being able to say something, being able to express what you want to say in a format that is succinct, right? You need to be really intentional when you only have this amount of, or like you put yourself in this amount of time to say something. So in some ways, I think that's much more difficult, right? It's much more difficult. It's much more thoughtful. So thank you for sharing the intention and the curation and the mission. So yeah, please let us know. Um, please share with us some of the upcoming programs, some past things that would give us um, kind of let us know how your intention and curation efforts kind of come through the work, if that's okay.
Yeah, I will. I'm going to go through these slides. Sorry.
Yeah.
This is just like the intro stuff that
Yeah, please.
but yeah, no, so I probably should have touched on this a little bit, just in terms of like the design and kind of like I wanted to, yeah, just to give a shout out to the incredible designers that we've worked with and the intention kind of behind our like visual identity and how much it's you know, it is embedded in our Latin American identity and a representation of that. But I'll just move on quickly. There's also just a look at our digital platform where you can kind of watch shorts for free. Then we went over this, and then so we have this. Deanna, do you wanna maybe talk through this program? I can also share some trailers as well. So I feel like I've been speaking a lot.
Yeah, no. So last year, well, first I want to just end the conversation that the previous conversation, the question. So yeah, I mean, I think like when I first joined Daniel, what really interests me was that vision of bringing forward programming that would explore the concept of supporting filmmakers from theatrical to online activities, and at the same time celebrating the emerging voices that are portraying this range of identities and styles of Latin American on film. And I think like Daniel and I both work in our own fields that we've seen that experience firsthand, where short filmmakers, you know, their films don't get seen, or, you know, they're just struggling to sustain their craft. And to me personally, meeting short filmmakers, it's always disappointing to see that, you know, they're being discouraged because they don't have an exhibition and distribution plan, or they don't have resources to really explore that idea. So I think like at the same time, like I think in the current US market, and considering just like the ecosystem that filmmakers have to go through from festival to, you know, festival run after post-festival run, you know, and especially non-English language films, they just become lost and they don't get any type of exhibition and distribution deal. So I think because we've seen this firsthand, you know, we've tried to come together and particularly focus on Latin American films and filmmakers and figure out that formula for exhibition and distribution together. So I think CiNEOLA is really an experimental, I would call it, like distribution platform where we want to share these short films in different theaters around the country, in different cities. We want to create that community engagement. We want to give them the resources. We want to allow them and give them the space for filmmakers to talk about their films. And and then also feature them in the platform so that they also get that visibility and they get that engagement from audiences anywhere, because the platform is free and accessible. So yeah, Colombian Film is a film series that CiNEOLA, what Daniel, like, has been doing for maybe the last 2 years, 3 years, but last year, we had like our second edition, right, of Colombia Film, Hablemos del Pasado, and we had 2 just super powerful documentary film features that just address the history of Colombia through archival footage. So it was utilizing archival footage in such a powerful way, where it was appropriating news TV shows and all of that, and just kind of retelling the history through the filmmaker's perspective. And again, we've had a very strong collaboration with the Roxy Theater in San Francisco, and is one of the theaters that we've kind of been building that experiment of like what it would be like to have these films that rarely get seen in this side of the coast, and have them premiere or have them screen in the Roxy Theater, and then bring them into the platform and create some kind of engagement around them.
Yeah, I think this is a really nice example for us of, an experiment paying off. Like Diana says, like totally right. Like a lot of this is experimental, like in nature, in terms of like these kind of like distribution like models that we're kind of playing with. We're both filmmakers. We've both worked on the kind of distribution, exhibition, festival kind of side of things. And so there is an element of this of like, fuck, like let's like figure this out together, like with the filmmakers. And it's like, we fucking love your work. Like we know we can get it in front of audiences. Like let's play around with formats a little bit. Let's see how we can like maximize that experience. And Colombian Film, like there was definitely a push here for this, like, obviously the curation of everything that Diana described, but then there was a risk of like, wow, this is quite like hyper specific, but it really paid off. And the Colombian community in the Bay Area really like showed up. And yeah, now it is this is an ongoing like annual series. And Diana's point around being able to give these projects their premieres and showing them to audiences here for the first time is just such a privilege. Like giving the North American premiere for El Rojo Más Puro is, for us was a really big deal, and also just kind of points to that like perplexion of like, fuck, like how has this not been shown here already? Like how has no one else kind of like picked this up? So we have like a couple of like trailers just to kind of give you all a bit of a taste. I think these 2 films, again, like the use of archival, kind of coming at it from different angles, but both covering, there's overlap in terms of the historical period in the late 80s that they cover. So I will share those.
Wonderful. I want to just say, when you said about the hyper specific, that is a way to combat the homogenization that happens within our community. And so you're doing that of supporting people's very specific identities, specific lived experiences, specific art, specific point of view. So that's how we thrive together as a community, as our culture, as we learn more about the hyper specifics of our community, right? So I just wanted to
I love that.
Share that with you. Thank you.
I love that. Thank you.
Well,
okay, I'm gonna sorry.
I'll chill on that. So
gonna play this one. I hope this format works okay. I will say that we were sent the trailer in like a 9:16, so this might appear a bit weird, but hopefully this works. Can you all see that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Buenas noches. ...5 de enero de 1982.
Oh, gloria y más sensible, oh, jubilee. Atención.
¿Qué fue lo que pasó?
Yo no soy uno de esos niños, pero podría serlo.
Okay, that was the trailer for nuestra película.
Amazing.
So I got like goosebumps watching that. That is a very
Okay.
it's a very intense, necessary, excellently executed film. But yeah, it was an emotional screening. We'll put it that way.
Mhm.
Okay, and then
Want to
sorry.
watch that, so
Yeah, definitely recommend seeking that one out. And then this one is El Rojo Más Puro, which is from a director called Gira Plaza Urban. And we were keen to put this one in as well to kind of give like a geographical diversity in terms of El Rojo Más Puro being told more from like a kind of like Bogota, like central perspective, and El Rojo Más Puro, sorry, nuestra película, yeah, from like a Bogota kind of perspective, and El Rojo Más Puro from like Caribbean, Colombian kind of perspective as well.
Los álbumes de mi casa estaban llenos de fotografías de mi papá en lugares que yo nunca había visto. En los 80, su partido lo envió a Rusia para protegerlo de las amenazas que recibió por ser líder sindical. Esos álbumes también estaban llenos de gente que marchaba, protestaba y se reunía, pero sobre todo, gente que no era mi familia. En esta imagen hay un hombre muerto sobre el andén. Minutos antes, ese hombre quiso matar a mi papá.
Nos hemos acostumbrado a eso, a ver que maten a la gente, a las cabezas, a la inteligencia, y ya, no pasa nada.
Miedo tiene todo el mundo, pero que yo esté pensando que me van a matar y pensando, la verdad, sinceramente te lo digo, no.
Yo te voy a decir algo, Gira, por favor.
Ajá.
Él no puede vivir más aquí en Cartagena.
Las amenazas siempre estuvieron presentes, pero nunca pensamos que le podía pasar algo a mi papá. ¿Qué razones hay para matar a alguien?
wow.
So yeah, I hope that kind of gives, I guess, a bit of a flavor for the kind of curation. I think definitely, I think there's like a mutual shared interest in terms of just like how, you know, what the documentary form is and how it can be kind of like pushed and we had a few more slides here around like stuff that we've like screened. I'm going to just go through them quickly and then let, I think, Deanna, maybe just because of time, like talk about like upcoming programs and you know, these other films that, again, I'll just scroll through quickly, but you'll be able to find these on our on the platform. They're all available to watch. This is a previous theatre program. You can see the poster behind me actually, that we did on Latinx perspective on reproductive rights called Cuerpos Libres. And then yeah, other shorts that are on the platform, and just various kind of collaborations and activities that we did as these kind of complementary activities and partnerships with with other orgs.
Wonderful.
But
Drop the link for where people can check out the films on the chat.
sure.
Yeah, and I think I can talk about our upcoming programs that we're really excited about. And I think that these two films, Nuestra Película and El Rojo Más Puro, demonstrate that a little bit of how Latin American filmmakers and a lot of Latin American filmmakers are starting to kind of turn the camera into themselves and feel comfortable enough to start telling their stories and their experiences. And this year we've curated our first short film program that again will be screening at the Roxy in April. And it's a series of short films that are serving the space where the filmmakers are at. They're talking about family memories, they're talking about self-identity. And we're including films from Mexico, we're including films from Ecuador, Colombia. And again, it's filmmakers that in this very experimental, innovative, diary-like, collage-like styles are kind of reconstructing familial history, lingering the camera on themselves, positioning emotions out in their surroundings, in their land, in their space, in the ocean. So we have a lot of these motifs of filmmakers prioritizing themselves, embracing just their experiences and their trauma and their history and their joy and all of their emotions and sharing that in these very beautiful films. So we're really excited about these 6 short films. Our program is called Cada Cuadro Posible. And this, again, we're gonna be able to premiere it at the Roxy, then we'll be able to pitch it to different theaters across the country, and ultimately having 2 or 3 of those short films end up in the platform for its proper distribution. And throughout all that time, we'll be creating all kinds of promotional material, conversations, interviews with filmmakers. We'll be able to talk about their work, and audiences will be able to just engage with that, with not only the film, but also those conversations post-film and the making of the film and everything. So we're really proud of that.
I mean, it sounds amazing. Looks like I'm going to be going to San Francisco. So come support and also be part of the community. I just want to shout out both of you for making space for people to be their full selves, and talking about this. I love what you said, Diana, about turning the camera into themselves, right? A lot of the themes throughout this conference have been on, right, identity, intersectional identities, and we're really seeing, even with the trailers that you've shared, just the intersectionality of these experiences and of these identities. And truly, this is just a way to thrive as a Latinoamericanos, right?
Yeah.
Beautiful work, y'all. Wow. Going through that.
Danielle, you want to share about the production? Do we have enough time, or?
Yeah, we can go through quickly if that sounds all right.
And for the folks that are here in the meeting, if you want to start dropping in questions in the chat, and we can get to them towards the end of this time that we have together, we definitely will do that. So you can ask questions in the chat as we're chatting right now. So.
Thank you, Sully. And yeah, I think with Cada Cuadro Posible as well, I think that really excited. Again, we're both big kind of advocates for short filmmaking, and this will be the first time that we're bringing one of our short film programs to in person, to big screen. I will say also that Diana is very generous in using the we there, but that this is the first CiNEOLA program that Diana has solely programmed and has done a really beautiful job. So very, very excited to to share that with audiences here in San Francisco and very likely, you know, other parts of the country later this year also. I guess, yeah, it's kind of like the final piece, you know, again, like we're both filmmakers. One of the parts of CiNEOLA that I think we're most proud of as well is a lot of this kind of production of original content that's kind of ranged from, you know, commissioning artists, collaborating with other orgs, musicians, filmmakers, etc., to create pieces that complement the films that we're releasing. And you know, podcasts is a piece of that we've definitely experimented with. There's some great stuff that you can see on our YouTube channel, conversations between Latin American artists and filmmakers. And then kind of, you know, I guess getting a bit more ambitious with it and actually, you know, producing our own kind of short films under the CiNEOLA kind of label as well as kind of original shorts. So the first one of this was Elephant. So if anyone that was here at the last Latinx Connect, maybe would have got a chance to see that. That was a short film that I made. Sully mentioned it earlier, that kind of explores the relationship between space and identity and kind of looks at the displacement of London's Latin American community. I will drop a link into, sorry, we've got the screenings there, but I'll drop a link into the chat for the website so that you can see more about that if you wish. It should work. Sorry. Yeah, sorry, we're kind of like short for time, so I'm gonna dwell on this one for too long. But this is the latest film that, you know, is a CiNEOLA original production. We premiered it recently at the True False Film Festival 3 weeks ago, actually today. This is Junior Tu Papa. And we've got a few upcoming screenings, which we'll be announcing soon. One of which will actually be in Colombia, at Cartagena, which will be our Latin American premiere. And then we have another one coming to the East Coast, which I can't really talk about beyond that at this point. But we'll be announcing that soon, and you can follow the film. I'll drop that into the chat as well for the Instagram account, but we do have a short clip that we want to share.
Yeah, and after we watch the clip, I'd love for you to share with us like how this idea got started and its connections to you.
Yeah, I would absolutely love to. Cool. So this is the opening few minutes of Junior Tu Papa.
Can I also say that I also got to see this one, and y'all, oh, so good.
muy buenas noches y qué buenas noches, porque hoy todos los barranquilleros, toda la gente de la costa, incluso de muchos rincones del país, están realmente felices por la conquista del tercer título en la historial deportivo del Junior de Barranquilla.
Pero el pueblo barranquillero verdaderamente está feliz, está contento, está satisfecho por la labor desarrollada por el Junior de Barranquilla, por su Junior del alma. Junior, su papá, se escucha a coro en todas las calles. Junior, su papá.
Una oda al fútbol que me mantiene conectado a mi cultura, mi gente, mi historia. Desde mi primer recuerdo del deporte, viendo la final del 93 en un VHS en Londres, donde mi padre me enseñó a amar esa camisa rojiblanca.
My goodness.
So that's actually the first time we kind of like shared a trailer or anything of that nature. So
Thank you so much.
yeah, no, I'm very happy to that this is where we were able to do that. So yeah, I think sorry to answer your question from before. This is, I think hopefully it came across a very like personal film. It's a film about a football match that happened in 1993 that I watched on a VHS tape in London with my dad. And it was the final of the Colombian kind of like championship that was won by, our team, my family's team, Junior, which is based in Barranquilla and is very much kind of an emblem, like a representation for the Caribbean region of the country. It was a game that came at the end of the year. So it was on December 19th, 93. 17 days before that, Pablo Escobar had been killed by the police in Medellin, and that year has just been a one of many, but one like a peak year in terms of like violence in Colombia. And so the film kind of delves into the kind of the context surrounding that one game and that one kind of 90-minute period of time. From the socio-political kind of context, from the conflict in Colombia, relationships between me and my family, and kind of looking back at Colombia and very specifically the Caribbean region. So it's told through phone calls with my father and two of my uncles, kind of trying to piece together whatever's left of our memory from back then to kind of relive that moment.
That's wonderful. And going along with the theme of this conference, which is why I wanted to bring this into this space, right, is dialogues and dialogues about our identities, intersectional identities, and like you said, Deanna, turning the camera into ourselves and having those really hyper-specific conversations that hit on really broad topics that we actually all experience in different ways, right? So we all experience figuring out our identity, figuring out a sense of community, figuring out a sense of connection to who we are and our culture when we're not in the kind of physical space, right, of our culture. So, Danielle and I are friends, so we've talked about this quite a bit, right? I'm the first generation Dominican, right? Feeling not Dominican enough here or not this enough here. And what was the process like for you, Danielle, making this film that was so personal and vulnerable about your own identity as a Colombian British person, and kind of that relationship to your own culture and your own identity?
Yeah, I guess for me, it kind of like started off feeling like an extremely like selfish project. It was just like if like I kind of came at it from like if there was one film that I wanted to exist just for me and nobody else, it would be a film about that game, because that is like one of my most precious kind of like memories. And one of my first, you know, my first memories of football. And I think like so many of us, you know, I was born in London, like a year after my family moved there. And you know, I think a lot of us in those situations in the diaspora, you know, there's obviously certain kind of like things that we kind of like cling sounds a bit mean, but like that we hold on to that kind of connect us back to home, right? These connectors, and I think football is I think quite a typical one for people. I think especially within Latin America. I think Colombia at that time as well was going through a period where the national team was really it. Like we were, you know, we just qualified for the World Cup in 1994. That was in the USA. We were one of the favorites to going into that competition. And that came at the same time as this just like extreme like level of violence that was going on internally. And that like further like definitely kind of translated, I think, you know, across the diaspora. Like there was like a real obsession. I remember so much like every time I'd come back to Colombia, you know, I'd be buying like football shirts, we'd be watching football, like as a child, like I just like lived in like a full football kit of just like a Colombian football kit. Like that's all I would wear. And so I think that a huge part of this for me was like was kind of the reassurance also from like other people that came on board to the project, their support and their reassurance that kind of, I guess, kind of gave me like the courage to be like, actually, like this is worth making. Like there is, you know, kind of like what you touched on before, Sully, like there is relatability and like intention in that specificity. There is, you know, it's just like a much like sharper tool for getting at the truth. And so it really seemed to connect with people for a variety of reasons. And so I'm just like incredibly grateful to you know, a lot of people worked on this film from the UK over here in San Francisco and back in Colombia as well. So for me, it was also a very like nice opportunity to kind of connect those three nodes as well of like essentially like my three homes. And yeah, in terms of speaking to my father, my two uncles, you know, to be very honest, like it was also like a bit of an excuse just to kind of reconnect and go through this process. And I don't know, this has come up in conversations with other filmmakers as well, but my feeling is definitely that one of like coming out of the film and being like, you know what, if this never goes anywhere, like even just the process alone was just like so like wonderful and like valuable that is enough. And that was definitely the case here. And yeah, it definitely took some pushing from others in terms of me being in it more, and I end up in it quite a lot. Like you saw, there's like, you know, child like home video stuff of me that I was definitely trying to like engineer a way in which I just wasn't in the film at all. But again, yeah, ultimately. Well, it ended up being it, yeah, but it wasn't, yeah, that wasn't the intention. But yeah, I guess that's just how it had to be.
Funny. You're like,
Yeah.
it's so personal. You're like, but I don't want to. We'll talk about that later. We'll talk about that later. To me, that's really fun. I keep saying what you said, Diana, about turning the camera into ourselves, right? And I love that you all are supporting the folks that are doing that and making the space for them, right? I don't know very much about the film industry, but as a creative myself and as an artist, more often than not, sometimes when we dabble in different types of art making, we end up feeling like we have to conform and like do things a certain way to hit certain level, like, or hit like success as defined by other people that are not like from our community or from with our backgrounds, right? So it's like you're creating a space and a new definition of success for folks that are really fully being themselves in all the ways and in their art and then as people. So I just want to give you all that. You are doing beautiful work. And I'm super excited to see how the in-person events continue to develop and how the curation and the programs continue to develop. Thank you for sharing a clip with us for the first, thank you for doing that in this space.
Yeah, thanks for letting me.
All period. I was like, oh my God. Oh. Well, I've already seen it, y'all, and I had so many feelings. I still have so many feelings. I probably will watch it again. But I want to open up the space to questions. I know that I saw one in the chat. So Victor, Liana and Daniel, Victor's asking, how do you foresee the impact of these films on different audiences? So like younger folks, students, educators, right, that might want to incorporate some of the work and some of the curation that you do into their curriculums. Have you thought about the ways in which that could have an impact?
Well, I think for me, I see the platform as a resource, as a rich catalog and resource that can be helpful for anybody that stumbles upon the website. It would be a filmmaker or students or just anybody who's searching, the best Latin American films or best Latin American directors that are not the regular, Hollywood ones. But I think in a broader point and kind of what has been discussed here in the space, to me, I feel like, again, this is an experimental model that I think, even if we're trying to delve on more like the distribution side and support that later stage of filmmakers, I think that it will really have an impact on the stages even before that. And what I mean by it is that as filmmakers are starting to make more personal work, are starting to celebrate their identity and their history and their background and where they were born or where they're from, hopefully film festivals and people in these leadership positions in film festivals will realize that this is work that is being appreciated, that should be respected, that should be shown to audiences, that it's not just a very niche thing, but that it is being sought after. And, I think like Daniela and I can do certain things in the certain positions that we're in. And, this is CiNEOLA is a result of that. Like we wanted to do our own on our own terms. But, hopefully I think it really does shake that perspective of like, we need these stories, and even audiences that are not from the same community, need to learn more about it, need to be educated more about Latin America in general. Because I think that there is an ignorance and just a lack of consideration for cultures within Latin America. So I hope that the impact is that we're able to change that ecosystem where Latin American films and stories and filmmakers are celebrated from the beginning and are able to get a more robust exhibition and distribution, whether it's from us or just from the general ecosystem of film festivals and film distribution. But Daniel, I don't know if you want to add anything else, how you see that impact, but I see it that way too.
Yeah, no, I think I really think that's spot on. I think this, for me, that piece that Diana touched on around like us having our own space for this is so fundamental. And it goes back to the earlier point of like, from exhibiting, from making, but from before. Like I think that we're seeing this at like, we're seeing this at a level that, basically spans like this whole kind of like pipeline of like artistry and self-expression in terms of, I'll use the example of the UK where, the Latino culture and the Latino identity is far more kind of like nascent. I was born in 87. the majority of people that came from Latin America, which at that time were Colombian, the first kind of wave would have been like in the 80s, mid 80s. And so we're kind of now getting into like the second generation. And finally, we're getting to a point where we're telling our own stories. There is a much more of a hybrid identity that's being developed. And we are no longer, you know, dependent on gratitude to others telling our stories for us. Like we're able to tell them ourselves. You know, we were speaking earlier and we've used the term like anthropologization. I don't even know if that's a word, but you get it, like in terms of like what it kind of feels like sometimes in terms of how the Latin American identity in the UK is kind of perceived, portrayed, approached. And you're kind of always waiting for that validation, for that permission, but that like, you know, Britishness to like invite you in. And I think that's also, you know, that's exactly what Diana's talking about, I think. And but as I see it within the context of here, it's like, okay, what if we're not only telling our own stories, we're also supporting our own stories, distributing our own stories, exhibiting our own stories, connecting to our own community, our own audiences with those stories, and really making it for us, like without that necessity for that permission. And that's something that you know, the catalog that Diana described, like that, I really believe that is something that, again, this goes back to the valuation of short form content. It's not like a flash in the pan, like this film was made in 2021, 2020, so it's no longer valuable or relevant. It's like, this is really like an archive that we're trying to build as well. And that's why that catalog is so important in terms of it exists within the context of an archive. So each piece remains and retains its value because it's part of that kind of like bigger picture. And so to be able to do that within a very specific like Latin American context that runs the breadth of the cultures, the identities of the region, from the things that connect us to the things that like separate us, you know, like I think that's really fundamental, and creating these spaces where, you know, we have this like ni de aquí ni de allá trope, which I think is kind of like, honest, I'm not like a big fan of it. Like I feel like that's almost like a symptom of this kind of, I don't know, I guess we're trying to create like a new space that kind of like negates that, whereas like, you know what, like we can be from both, but we can also be from this kind of like third place that we're carving out for ourselves. And like that's here. And I think that's what we're seeing in this kind of generation. And I don't know, it just seems, probably just because of my own proximity to it, but it just seems a lot more kind of like on the surface from what I see in the UK, at least, from it being like a much kind of like newer like diaspora kind of, or portion of the diaspora. So from my perspective, like I definitely have like a huge motivation to like contribute to what is the like Latino, Latinx, British kind of like archive and like body of like work, where Elephant was this kind of like portrayal of it. Junior Tu Papa is kind of like more like a voice from within it, kind of an expression of that. And so that's my kind of like very personal portion of like the motivation, but I think it feeds into the bigger picture as Deanna described it, for why we're doing the work that we do and why it's important to us, at least, which I think is enough.
Yeah, I mean, beautifully said. As you were talking, I was thinking, and as both of you were talking, I was thinking about just kind of relating it back to like what I know, right, which is opera, right, and social activism, and like kind of that social work kind of perspective I have, and how even within opera, right, which is a very Eurocentric art form that tells us that we weren't part of it as Latinos in general, we were part of it. We're just like kind of purposely left out of the narrative, right? And so kind of reclaiming those narratives, right? Taking back those narratives and uplifting those narratives that are usually like pushed to the side, I think is super important. And what I think it does also for younger folks that are seeing the work that you're doing is letting them know that this is a possibility. right? The reason I started singing opera is because I went to a music library and I saw Black opera singers. And I said, oh, okay, I can do that then, because otherwise I didn't see anybody that represented me, right? So you're making it, this kind of makes a pipeline for other folks and yourselves to become the folks that go up in leadership, right? In this leadership for distribution, for who gets to come in. And all of a sudden, we start having a new crop of folks that have a more intersectional view and will open those gates up to our communities. So I don't know if you've ever thought about what you do in that way, but that's how I see it. And so kudos to you. Y'all are doing social work and you don't even know. I always think everybody's doing social work. So don't mind. I also see your film, like I also see these like film is very accessible for storytelling and for people to absorb something that they're not accustomed to. So platforming these very like hyper specific films telling these stories will open people's eyes up to communities and peoples and cultures that they don't otherwise have connection or experience with. And it makes for more curiosity and openness as human beings and human interdependence, I think. I don't know. I'm very much getting into my community liberation vibes right now. But I mean, I will specifically speak on my experience. I had never met a British Latino until I met Daniel. And I even told him, I was like, hold on a second, what? Because I have a British and English, and then he has a very Colombian accent in Spanish. And I was, whoa, what? I remember that first moment. I was like, wow, I don't know if I probably told you to your face, like, this is
Oh yeah, I have that first moment over and over again whenever I meet anyone in
You're
this
like,
country.
yeah, because it was a big group of us. We're like, whoa, right? So, but then I just got to learn about the diaspora in a way that I otherwise was not aware of. So this is what I mean, even within our own community, right? For ourselves, we're connecting and educating and being open and curious about each other. So what does that do also for the community?
I think also, and I don't know, I'll let Diana maybe reject this. I'm not trying to speak for both of us, but I think also with the like with the curation and with the kind of I think sensibilities that we kind of share in terms of the programming, I think it speaks to that curiosity, and I think that it's about like kind of leaving audiences with questions and not kind of pandering and not leaving everything kind of like tied up in a neat little bow and kind of allowing for that exploration, that discovery, which, you know, I think kind of addresses what you're kind of talking about, Soli, and I think there's a very specific kind of like Latin America or like Latino, like diasporic like content that, you know, that is regularly kind of, I guess, produced and like programmed in the US specifically that I really struggle to connect with. And so I think for me, this was kind of like an alternative to that, or an addition to that as well, you know, in terms of like, you know, why don't we have that kind of range in terms of the like Latin American, like Latino content that is consumed within the US, and having more of that, yeah, more of that view. I don't know if that makes like perfect sense, but
it does. Yeah, and I don't know. Are you gonna, as Daniel said,
reject? No. I agree with him. I mean, I think like, yeah, I think we saw that in the Colombia on Film series last year. There were people just coming out of the theater, just really moved by the documentaries and seeing that, just validating their experience and their trauma and their understanding of their history. And I think those kind of films do challenge us. I think we do need to see that kind of dark side of our stories and our identities and our history, and And, I think like to Daniel's point, usually I think US film festivals tend to program films that Latin American films or Latinx films that, yes, they're entertaining, they're celebrating culture and everything, but I think we want to do like a balance of both, but we're also having a discussion of like how history affects us and how we register it, within a different country, and how that connects us maybe to other Latin American people, in the Bay Area, in San Francisco, in that have also emigrated here. So I think that work is really important. So I agree with you, Daniel.
Whoa, yeah. But having those difficult conversations, right, is also important, is what I'm getting. Like having those looking at the hard stuff of our experience is also important. It's our lived experience as human beings, as Latinos, culturally, whatever. It's not all rainbows and sprinkles and unicorns, right? It's tough.
Yeah.
And giving space for those tough conversations and those tough experiences where we could sit with it and learn from it and connect even in those ways is super important. I know that when I consume things that talk about, things about my own identity as Afro-Latina, right? And, having to deal with racism and things like that, like, I'm like, I feel seen in that way too, right? Because I have those experiences as well. So I appreciate you all for being courageous and thoughtful and intentional about making space for that too. Like everything, the good, the bad, the ugly, right? So thank you all so much. So we have 5 minutes left on this beautiful panel, and I just want to say thank you so much to the both of you. I would, if you want to drop any links, any information in the chat for the participants, anything that you want to share, please feel free to do it right now, Daniel and Liana. If there are any other questions, anybody wants to unmute themselves and say something or drop it in the chat, please do it now as we have, and as we are in our last few minutes of the panel. Are there any hopes or are there, and in the last little bit, I want to kind of ask y'all as we're thinking about Imaginemos Juntos, imagining without any barriers, right? What do you hope? What do you imagine that the future of Latin American film curation and distribution and storytelling looks like in like the next 5 years here in the US?
I mean, I can say that within the context of CiNEOLA specifically, I think I definitely have ambitions. We want to be more kind of like tangibly supporting projects. I think being able to support like filmmakers in in funding, financing, like the production and like distribution of work, and be able to be in a situation where we can provide that kind of like robust, again, kind of like distribution kind of pipeline, and have a roster of projects where we have the resource to really kind of like put our money where our mouth is, to put it crassly.
Understandable, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, get filmmakers paid. I think like it's so important for filmmakers, short filmmakers, and to feel like their work deserves respect, and is sustainable for them to keep doing more work, and for us to keep supporting it, not only giving a platform and creating conversation and having dialogue, but also that this is their career and this is their profession, and that Latin American filmmakers get paid and get that recognition, and that US audiences get accustomed to loving and going to the movies to see, non-English, Spanish language films. I think that to me is really important.
What can we, as the folks here that are in here's like the Zoom, what can we do now outside of course, subscribing to the newsletter for CiNEOLA and following everything that they do on their socials? Outside of that, what can we do to support the filmmakers that are making these short films and kind of help in shifting the narrative in that way as just like audience members and people that are interested? Like, how can we, do you all have any ideas how we can support?
Just show up to screenings. I think it's, I think it really is as I don't know if I'm just being overly simplistic, but seeking out your local film festivals. There's a lot of like Latin American specific film festivals, a lot across the US, which is really like a luxury. Some really fantastic programming across the whole country. And I think it's about, seeking those out and like really turning up in person.
Yeah.
Paying for a ticket, supporting them financially, and really kind of like, I guess, validating that there is an audience, that there is an appetite, that there is support there for the kind of programming that we've been talking about to this past hour and a bit, because those festivals and other kind of like special screening programs, we're definitely not the only or the first people doing this, and through attendance and just like financial sustainability, like that's how films will potentially then go on to get distribution, get like streaming, get there needs to be kind of like a validation of the audience first and foremost, and then aside from that, of course, you're kind of supporting the various organizations that are kind of doing this work as well.
Wonderful. So we got to show up for our community. And on that note, y'all, thank you so much. Let's give our virtual round of applause to our beautiful panelists for sharing CiNEOLA, Latinoamérica on film. Oh man, thank y'all so much. This was really beautiful. Thank you for sharing space with us this year. And with that, I will say thank you everybody for coming. Please make sure to click all the links in the chat. Lisa, thank you for your beautiful comment. She's very appreciative of this topic and your work. So thank you all so much. And with that, we will end this session.